The dead have been buried with flowers for at least 12,000 years, and due to the ubiquity of the use of flowers in funerary rituals, it may go back to the dawn of modern man. Pollen discovered in Shanidar Cave, Iraq, hints at the possibility that Neanderthals may have used flowers in their burial practices around 70,000 years ago. One of the dead was buried on a mat of woody horsetail. Flowering plants identified by their pollen were placed around the corpse, including grape hyacinths, yarrow, types of thistle and mallow, and cornflowers. These plants have medicinal properties which may allude to their value to the people. Other early burials show signs of care and respect for the dead. Neanderthal bones have been found sprinkled with red ochre, surrounded by a ring of goat's horns, and buried with food and tools. Civilized man has little time for such primitive romanticism. The bones of the dead are too valuable to waste. The Battle of Waterloo took place in Belgium, which was then part of the Netherlands, on the 18th of June 1815. The conflict lasted only a few hours, but brought an end to the imperial career of Napoleon, and an end to the lives of almost 50,000 soldiers and 7,000 horses. The battle ended as night began to fall, which greatly aided the corpse robbers, including some of the men who had survived the fighting that day. The dead were plundered of anything of value, which included their teeth. As many of those who died were young, their teeth were still in good condition. They were pulled or knocked out of their jaws and collected for sale to dentists, who used them to make false teeth. So many dentures were sold in the 19th century, they were referred to as Waterloo teeth. The Etruscans had invented false teeth in about 700 BC, but the art was lost after the fall of the Roman Empire. Not until the 18th century did false teeth return to fashion. George Washington wore a plate made of hippopotamus ivory, embedded with teeth from donkeys, horses, and humans. Human teeth prior to Waterloo had been difficult to acquire in quantity. An advertisement in a New York newspaper in 1783 offered 2 guineas for sound teeth to anyone desperate enough to sell them out of their mouth. The main suppliers of teeth were resurrection men, who pilfered the graveyards of their corpses to sell to surgeons. A French pharmacist named Alexis du Château invented porcelain teeth in the mid-1700s, but early porcelain teeth, however, were not durable, and it took technical improvements and time before they became more popular than Waterloo teeth, which remained in use throughout the 19th century. Despite the number of original Waterloo teeth being exhausted, the supply of human teeth was augmented by the Crimean War and the American Civil War. Claudius Ashe, allegedly, because he detested handling the teeth of the dead, perfected porcelain teeth in London in 1837. Used false teeth for sale in a second-hand shop in London was mentioned in a newspaper article in July 1914. Most of the dentures, which were on display in a glass bowl in the window, had been pawned by their owners, who intended to reclaim them, but the proprietor of the store did know of one old lady, whose nephew paid for her funeral, who took the teeth from her mouth for sale before her burial, considering it a waste of good teeth to be buried. Other sets may have come from the dead. The seller did not know. Buyers came to the shop and tried out the plates for fit, most being close enough but not quite. One lucky toothless man found a set which fitted him perfectly, as they had been stolen from his mouth while he slept off a pub crawl in a park. Napoleon's ambitions provided not just a supply of teeth, but also of bones. The vineyards of Portugal and Spain were said to produce the richest wines, due to the remains of the soldiers who had died in the Peninsular Wars of 1807 to 1814. Other battlefields at Leipzig, Austerlitz, and reliable old Waterloo provided an immense amount of human bone to grind into fertilizer. Europe had plundered the tombs of Egypt and used mummified bodies as a source of bone, but those of dead soldiers were avidly plucked from the ground where they died and sold. In 1822, the London Observer reported that an estimated 1 million bushels of bones, both animal and human, were imported from Germany into the port of Hull in England. It was claimed in 1841 that cemeteries near the coast in Germany were robbed of the dead to add to the pile of bones. Once delivered to England, steam-driven grinding machines reduced them to a useful form to sell to farmers. In 1889, just one ship, which left Alexandria, had 700 tons of bones gathered from the Sahara Desert, a mixture of camel, horse and human. The local people who gathered the bones had no qualms about collecting human bones, although they would not remove human skulls for this trade. Animal bones were collected in Australia by rag and bone collectors to supply the fertiliser industry. The early 1890s was a period of economic depression, which may be why in Hobart, Tasmania, some collectors of bones and bottles began raiding backyards for such items in 1894. Then in October of that year, it was revealed such raids were being carried out on the old neglected cemeteries of the city. 3 boys were discovered exiting a cemetery with 3 sacks of bones. When challenged, they ran back into the cemetery and were lost. Inspection revealed vaults had been opened and lead and bones stolen. In 1900 it was claimed that cemeteries in Sydney and Mudgee in New South Wales were also being targeted, with vaults broken open for bones to be taken for sale. In December 1924, a British steamer was held up in port at Salonika by workers appalled at the cargo she had taken on. Only intervention by the British consul and Greek authorities allowed the ship to sail for Marseille. The cargo were the bones of the victims of the massacres in Asia Minor a few years prior. Between 1913 and 1922, the Young Turk government were responsible for the deaths of between 500,000 and 900,000 Greeks, 270,000 Assyrians, and up to 1.8 million Armenians. Turks were also killed by Russian and Armenian troops. At least 150,000 were slaughtered. The bones of some of these millions of victims were taken away to be converted into manure. At least the military dead of the Great War were treated with more respect. Fabian Ware was a member of the British Red Cross working on the Western Front, who was shocked that soldiers were either quickly buried in hastily marked graves by their comrades, which soon would become lost, or simply left where they fell in no man's land. The new and efficient methods of butchery required new methods of handling the dead. The Imperial War Graves Commission was established in 1917 to ensure the burial of the dead of the British Empire and the marking of their graves with a uniform monument. Later war graves legislation provided legal protection to the remains in the ground. The dead can still be a source of profit today. On the 1st of May 2020, Washington became the first US state to allow dead bodies to be converted into a biosludge, using alkaline hydrolysis to break down flesh and bone, in a process called liquid cremation. Along with other human waste, the resulting jelly is pumped into the sewer systems and later harvested and sold to farms as fertiliser. Within a year, 20 states had authorised liquid cremations. All go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return.